Excellencies, distinguished guests, friends, and colleagues, a very good morning to all of you. Welcome to the second plenary session of the International Conference on Cohesive Societies. My name is Jack, and I'm very honored to be the moderator of the second plenary, which focuses on the theme of identity under the title of How Diversity Can Be Harnessed for the Common Good. I must confess that I'm not a morning person, but I am now wide awake after 2 cups of coffee. For many Singaporeans, our coffee culture stands out as part of our local identity. There are diverse ways to enjoy a cup of local coffee or kopi in Singapore. While some prefer kopi or kosong, which means black coffee without sugar, others like kopi gao, which means strong coffee with condensed milk. I usually go with kopi siu dai, which is coffee with less condensed milk. Well, life is sweet, but I prefer my coffee less sweet. For our distinguished visitors, I hope you will have a chance to order kopi like a pro during the community exploration. Related to the issue of diversity and identity, this plenary aims to ask the question, how does intersectionality and the issue of super diversity work in practice in the context of our modern world? The concept of intersectionality describes the way in which systems of inequality based on race, religion, gender, disability, class, and other forms of discrimination intersect to create unique dynamics and effects. As a theory and as a framework, intersectionality helps to explain how social identities work on multiple levels to create layers of inequality that structure the relative positions of individuals in society. On the other hand, the term super diversity, coined by anthropologist Stephen Vertovec in 2007, underlies a level and kind of complexity surpassing anything previously experienced in a particular society. Since then, the concept has been used in both academia and public policy to study diverse societies characterized by high level of complexity. Building on these insights, the main goal of this plenary would be to discuss the right tools to consider differences and overlapping identities, as well as to appreciate the complex but important role intersectionality plays in forging social cohesion. We are honored to have 3 distinguished speakers to share their thoughts and insights with us this morning. Although our distinguished speakers need no introduction, but please allow me to introduce them in the order they are speaking. Our first speaker is Mr. André Azoulay. Mr. Azoulay is a senior advisor to King Mohammed VI and an ambassador of Morocco throughout the world. He is the president of the Foundation of the 3 Cultures and the 3 Religions and the founding member of the C100 Davos Forum for the Dialogue of Civilizations and Religions. He is a strong advocate for peace and dialogue between the Arab Muslim world and Jewish communities in Europe, the United States, Morocco, as well as the global Arab and Jewish diasporas. He is also well known for his contributions to the peace process in the Middle East and for the many interfaith cross-cultural initiatives he spearheaded. Our second speaker is Professor Yoshiko Ashiwa. Professor Ashiwa is Professor of Anthropology and Global Studies and founding director of the Institute for the Study of Peace and Reconciliation at Hitotsubashi University. Her research interests include religion, arts, culture, values, modernity, globalization, and social movements in Asia, especially Sri Lanka, China, and Japan. She is co-editor of Making Religion, Making the State, The Politics of Religion in Modern China, and co-author of a forthcoming book, The Space of Religion, Temple, State, and Communities of Buddhism in Modern China. Our third speaker is Dr. Iyad Abumoghli. Dr. Abumoghli is the founder and director of the United Nations Environment Programme's Faith for Earth initiative. With more than 35 years of experience with international organizations, public sector, and scientific institutions, Dr. Abumoghli's expertise focuses on strategic planning, sustainable development, natural resources management, interfaith collaboration, and knowledge innovation. He's also the lead principal advisor on engaging with faith-based organizations at the United Nations Environment Programme. Our speakers will address the topic for about 10 minutes from the perspectives of anthropology, global institutions, and peace building. This will be followed by a Q&A session with the audience. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, Mr. Azoulay. The floor is yours.
Good morning to all. Salam alaikum. Shalom alaikum. In Morocco, we started the day by saying salam in Arabic, likulam in Hebrew, shalom in Hebrew, alaikum in Arabic. And this morning I took the risk to let my paper aside and to try to share with you my diversity and my complexity. And to add your introduction, Jake, let me just start by saying that I am Jewish, I am Berber, Amazigh, Morocco, I am an Arab, and I am probably a little European. That makes me a Moroccan citizen. And I want first to tell how grateful I am to the Singapore government to give me this chance to be the first time in this country, which I knew when I was an investment banker in Paris for its impressive success story on economy and finance and what was already at that time Singapore as a model country for us bankers. But this time I discovered something more. Usually we said Singapore is an inclusive country for everyone. But what I have seen for the last 2 days is it's not a rhetoric. It's not a theory. It's not just the way to be politically correct. It's a daily life everywhere. It's so impressive. We are in a time, we are in a period, we are in a world which unfortunately we are confronted to such regressive theories, such archaism, such extremism everywhere. And in this country, when you enter the country, you see what does it mean when you have harmony cycles. You have this way, so cool, so calm, so convincing to be together and to be different. It's fascinating, but in Singapore it's true. And I will come back to my country with new ideas, more confidence and more committed to what was my journey all my life. You also missed something when you introduced me. I have to confess that I am 3,000 years old. I'm saying that because belonging to my country, Morocco, it's not really known that Jews in this country arrived close to 1,000 years before Islam. So if I feel at home in Morocco, it's something which is deeply rooted in the history, in the mindset of the people, and it gives us a chance all along those years to try first to be resilient. When you are Jewish, when you are in a Muslim country, when you are in the Arab world, by today, I'm sure that you will be not really convinced with what I will tell you this morning, because when you heard about Jews and Muslims in your newspaper, when you are watching your TV in the evening, when you are looking on the social media, it's a story or a reality which means confrontation, break, denial, violence. I'm sorry to tell you that it is more complex than that. My history book, as I said, I will start just for 33,000 years, but in fact, it's more than that. This history book was not always a happy book. There were nice pages, and there were black pages. And in my country, we don't let anyone to tell us that when it comes to diversity, when it comes to having another experience between Islam and Judaism, we have to tell the truth to everyone and to give a chance to all narratives to be said, to be listened. And we know that there were some difficult moments. But at the end, what survived is something that needs to be known by this time. I feel at ease when I said that in my country, an Arab and a Muslim country, I'm just not a belonger to a minority. I am build my identity by trying to be a full citizen. Full citizen means to be just in a position to do, accept and leverage my complexity, and to try also to leverage it for the sake of a better understanding, for the sake of peace, for the sake of having in the Arab world and in the Muslim world a different narrative, a different experience, a different reality than the one you are unfortunately familiar with. Could you imagine Morocco by today is one of the very few countries in the world which has in the constitution, our constitution, the last one, which was voted in July 2011. In the foreword of the constitution, it is said, it is written, that Morocco by today was nursed, was forged, first by the Berber civilization, and then by the Judaism and the Jewish civilization, later on by the Arabo-Muslim civilization. And it is this text which was voted by 2/3 of my people. I don't know another constitution in the world which is saying just things which are as simple but as true as that. The last experience I have on that perspective was in my hometown, Mogador, Essaouira, south of Morocco. You know, in Islam, from Morocco to Singapore to Indonesia, which means 1.5 billion people, usually on the land of Islam, you don't have a non-Muslim majority. In my hometown in the 19th century, Mogador, Essaouira was the concrete capital of the country. Morocco was very small demographically, 7 million people, and this city was close to 22,000, 23,000 people. The Jews were 16,000, which means that for close to a century, in this Muslim city, the Jews were the majority. It's my hometown, and I have the feeling that my DNA is different because it was built, it was forged by Judaism and by Islam. We were so close. It was a kind of capillarity, porosity between the two civilizations that it creates something different. And it gave me the chance to be not only at ease, but as a full and responsible citizen committed to try to raise my voice, not only as an advisor of His Majesty the King, but just as a human being, to say, please, try to know, try to accept, try to understand, try to leverage the complexity of the situation. It's not black and white. It's true, there is a conflict in the Middle East. But there is another way to deal with. I have been taught by my rabbis, by my Jewish teachers in Mogador, Essaouira, that to be a good Jew means first to try to give a chance to the one I have in front of me to enjoy the same dignity, to enjoy the same freedom, to enjoy the same sovereignty than yourself. The day you accept that the one who is in front of you don't enjoy the same dignity, you lost your Judaism. It was a way for me to be a Moroccan Jew. And that's why also makes me, as an activist, to try to find a way out for the one I have in front of me by this time, which is the Palestinian. And if I was an activist for peace, it was not just to be, let's say, politically correct by fighting for the rights of the Palestinian. It was first to save and to keep alive my Judaism. It was my Judaism which was at stake at that time because of the Palestinian didn't enjoy the same dignity as myself. Not as an Israeli, I'm not an Israeli, I'm Jewish. But I mean, as you know, this complexity also, when you are Jew, to look on Israel and to be also responsible to give a chance to the Israeli people, to the Israeli children, for a future which is a future of safety, security, and peace. So, and I found this, let's say, double commitment as a Moroccan to be at the same time a good Moroccan Arab citizen trying to help the Palestinian people and to give them a chance to recover their freedom and dignity, and also as a Moroccan Jew to try to take care of the future of the state of Israel by, giving a chance to peace. That's what does it mean to be a Moroccan. I will just finish by sharing with you a last and fascinating experience I have again in Essaouira, my hometown, 2 years ago. I decided, and I have the chance to make it true, to have what we name Beit Dakira, which means the memory and the history house, the Jewish memory and history house in this city. And His Majesty the King Mohammed VI came to make the official opening. And he made something which I never dreamed of because it was so fascinating. He entered with me in the synagogue in this Beit Dakira. And he opened the sacred place where the scrolls of the Torah are. He put his hand on the scrolls and he prayed inside the synagogue. The King Mohammed VI, direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, may God keep his soul in peace. He prayed in the synagogue. It happens in an Arab country. It happens in the land of Islam. It happens in Morocco. And I can tell you, I will finish with that what we are experiencing in my country by today, and it was a long way to make it possible, is not anymore possible in New York, London, or Paris. It's over. But it still exists, still moving forward in one Arab country, in the land of Islam, and I'm so proud of. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Azoulay. Our second speaker is Professor Ashiwa.
Right. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy and honored to share my thoughts with you at such a significant conference. I'm Yoshiko Ashiwa. I'm teaching anthropology over nearly 30 years at Hitotsubashi University in Tokyo, Japan. And I would like to thank the S. Raj Ratnam School of International Studies and the Singapore MCCY. I got used to the abbreviations, MCCY, and also the many people who made this conference real. The title of my talk is just 10 minutes and is Facing Complexity, Overcoming Indifference. I believe one of the difficult issues for the cohesion of society is indifference of the other and self. It is said that the issue of indifference is to the other world exists in a closed and exclusive society. However, even in a super diverse society, indifference is still there. Perhaps the degree of the indifference is even higher because the existence of the countless other people, communities, and segments makes it incredibly difficult to commit to each other. So what do? We tend to ignore them. The countless others are beyond the person's capacity to understand deeply. If so, the words superdiversity and respect the differences, such as ethnicity, religions, gender, and sexuality, remain as just as a discourse and become an excuse for individuals not to commit to other sections and to stay with superficial understandings. In general, people tend to avoid facing complexities and prefer to turn to simple and often dichotomized recognitions of we and others. So having shared this kind of understanding with you, I try to make 3 points. One is Okay, sorry. So one is standing for complexities, and two is how to into the unknown other. In other words, how to stand for the complexities. Three, the issue remains. Okay. So first, let me briefly explain the tendency to avoid the complexity and the strength that can be driven from the facing the complexity. Nearly a half-century ago, the anthropologist Edmund Leach wrote about the primordial character of the human beings, cross-cultural, in his brilliant book, Culture and Communication. He argued that the people resort to polarization to simplify the complexities, perplexities, and puzzlement given by the unknown world. It is an easy and powerful way to make oneself feel secure. Simplification, or in other words, dichotomizations and polarizations, such as good and bad, and justice and evil, we and them, perhaps humans and the zombies. Zombies are a bit ambiguous category, but humans and zombies. This tendency is kind of bring us to the in the very safe zone. And of course, people place themselves on the side of good, right, and fair. Then they put the ambiguities and complexities into the box of the other. Having done this, they no longer have to think about it. Indifference comes here. However, at the end of the day, indifference to others leads to indifference to yourself. Indifference observes the energy for life, vita, that is activated by communicating with others. Vita is Hannah Arendt, the political scientist and philosopher. Her crucial insight into her political and academic struggles as a Jewish survivor of World War II. Vita, energy for life, exists in the communication with complexity, she said. People know that ambiguity is a rich resource for creating new concepts, new perceptions, and new ideas, and especially artists knows it very, very well about the values of ambiguity and perplexities. Religion, which produces semiotic space, leads us to deep understanding of humanity. Also, religion can help people who stay in the safe and comfortable cage of us and indifference. And religion should encourage them to face complexities and lead them to a deeper understanding of humanity. However, I say again that temptation to dichotomize is very strong and is often accelerated by religion too. So, how to get into the unknown other? Now, as anthropologist myself, let me suggest how societal leaders could help promote understanding of complexities. All leaders, I say, should have an anthropology-like experience of fieldwork in a different culture or different sections of diversity. The interface is the first step, but not enough. They need to stay in a different community for a longer period, at least, I say, 6 months or 1 year, sometimes more. So they need to their experiences of otherness in this way are most effective in understanding not only the other, but also the otherness in oneself. If leaders such as teachers, policymakers, and the NGO persons have these experiences, they will face the puzzlement and uncomfortableness of complexities, and definitely they find a way to understand the other and common ground. This will enrich their capacity of understanding other and resilience too, and also it influences the other community too. Other community has to accept these strangers, and they also face the bewilderment and the puzzlement too. Then, after these leaders return to their own communities, the influence on their followers will be immense. I especially expect religious leaders to have anthropology-like experiences in a religion other than theirs. This will let them perform a crucial role at the moment of the watershed, either to go toward indifference for other groups or to be antagonistic, or search for common ground with them. There have been many religious specialists in all religions who, throughout history, became mediators, translators, and bridges among different religions to seek common ground. These communicators are also needed nowadays very much within their own institutional religions as well, some of which split into numerous antagonistic sects. It is true that Gandhi said, there are as many religions as there are people. So I try to share the idea of the issue remains. There are so many issues remained unresolved, but finally, I try to focus on the issue of we are the 99%. Studies of the peace and conflicts have shown that social structural issues of the economic inequality underlie most communal violence. The frustrations caused by the economic gaps between poor and rich social classes has often been strategically aimed by power holders toward the issues of religious and ethnic conflicts, which becomes communal violence. Even the growth of the large middle class has not resolved the issues of social inequality. On the contrary, inequality is growing the middle class, and middle class identity is stripped away. Then middle class is divided into the poor and the rich, and this phenomenon happened especially in the last 2 decades. And interestingly, around 2007, when the concept of the super diversity was suggested by the anthropologist Steve Vedvec, another powerful concept was proposed by anthropologist David Graeber in his book, such as Death and Bullshit Jobs. Graeber is one of the theorists of Occupy Wall Street movement in 2011. The movement emphasized that, in contrast to the 1% super wealthy, super rich, the other 99% of the people struggle with poverty in the capitalist system. So it is undeniable that the other side of super diversity is a society lacking expectations of social mobility. This coexistence of social mobility among economic classes and the stability of the society is paradoxical and is a challenging issue globally, still unresolved. In sum, in a society of super diversity, intersectionality, and overlapping identities, we cannot stay in a compartmentalized cozy space with difference toward other, feeling ambiguity. Rather, we should communicate with others and live with them to gain the energy for life, vita, the energy of change, and seek the common ground of identity, ground of humanity. Do experience the other rather than stay comfortably in a separate system and pre-made system and sections. By doing this, we all strive to open potentials for alternative systems and ideas of now and the future. I'm ending my speech now, and sorry that I only talked about very abstract issues that I share, and when we become the session of the discussion, I love to talk about experiences and concrete examples and issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ashiwa. And our third speaker is Dr. Abumoghli. The floor is yours.
Good morning, eminent religious and faith leaders, distinguished guests, brothers and sisters. It gives me a great pleasure to be with you here today in this beautiful city and beautiful country that shows that determination, cohesion, and collaboration are keys to peace, stability, and development. Brothers and sisters, we're talking about religions, and religions, to me, have two important powers that can influence a new development paradigm that provides for the healthy planet and the prosperity of its people. First, the power of convening and convincing, where more than 84% of the people believe in a religion or a spiritual belief. The second power is the economic power, as religious institutions are the fourth largest economy on earth. Religious institutions own 8% of habitable land on earth, and that is 7,000 times the size of Singapore, or 21 times the size of the United Kingdom. Many religions dictate what people eat, drink, and how they should walk on earth. Therefore, religious values can impact individual and institutional behaviors towards nature and natural resources that will respectively affect production and consumption patterns. Ladies and gentlemen, the summer, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, is almost over. But it is leaving us with devastating impacts of droughts threatening food security in Africa. Europe's ecosystems with drying rivers, and Southern Asia with disturbing floods that have left millions in despair. Climate change is a justice issue, representing the interdependence of human rights, gender equality, peace building, and climate action. The role of faith is crucial. Faith leaders, in particular, are key actors in humanitarian response, protection, and social cohesion, and can work with actors working across the nexus of climate change, fragility, and peace building to promote trust building, social justice, and equal participation in decision making. Dignity, respect, tolerance, and peace are the principal prerequisites for cultural diversity and environmental integrity. A dialogue is needed that prevents polarization, resolves the main concerns of globalization, sustainable development, and the environment that we face today, and promotes respect and builds confidence among cultures. There are real opportunities stemming from interfaith collaboration. There is a vast potential of building a more peaceful, prosperous world by bringing issues of culture to the mainstream of development thinking and practice, by completing and complementing one another. Environmental degradation and climate change increasingly threaten peace and human security. UNEP's Faith for Earth initiative addresses these universal concerns by building on the role of faith-based organizations to advance environmental stewardship and facilitates interreligious dialogue to achieve shared objectives of environmental protection and sustainable development. The Faith for Earth program of the United Nations Environment Program was established in 2017 to promote interreligious and intercultural dialogue, understanding, and cooperation for peace between people and with the environment. The Faith for Earth initiative has three main goals. The first is to provide faith organizations and their leaders a neutral platform to engage in policy dialogue with decision makers. The second, to green faith-based organizations' investments and assets to support the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. And third, to green faith-based organizations, to provide faith and religious communities with knowledge to understand the relationship between religions and science and to effectively communicate with decision makers and the public. Faith for Earth facilitates multi-stakeholder dialogue, ensuring inclusivity of the voices of faith actors in advancing environmental stewardship. During the United Nations Environment Assembly, which is the highest level intergovernmental body responsible for environmental governance, the Faith for Earth initiative held an interfaith dialogue with 680 participants, mobilizing 94 religions and congregations and 180 speakers over 25 sessions. Resultantly, religions and congregations were united to produce a powerful position towards environmental governance that was submitted to the presidency of the Assembly. Although religions come from different belief backgrounds, all agree on human, spiritual, and moral responsibility towards Earth. The nexus of belief systems and environmental policy affirms the imperative of bringing religious actors to the forefront of environmental governance. We know that a stable environment is essential to guarantee peace and prosperity. This should serve as rallying call for all diverse faith actors to come together around a shared objective. All faith traditions have teachings that are directly or indirectly linked to the environment. There are strong ethics of environmental care that exist across all religions. These spiritual values and ethics reflect moral values about the way humans should behave towards nature, its resources, and other living things. Faith actors can also provide the social and spiritual support to increase resilience in communities affected by the double hardship of climate change and conflicts, supporting communities to adapt to climate change, and advocating for climate-sensitive ways of life. Despite the great diversity of religions and faith traditions, they all explore the relationship between humans and natural environment, contain ethical mandates concerning this relationship, and recognize that human well-being is fundamentally related to the environment. For example, in Buddhism, climate change is presented as the ecological consequence of our own collective karma. Therefore, it is not just an ecological crisis, but a spiritual one too. Hindu theology demonstrates a reverence for nature and the environment. The great forces of nature, the earth, sky, air, water, and fire, along with all life forms, are fundamentally interconnected to each other. In Christianity, humanity is seen to have been made in God's image and given a unique responsibility to care for the well-being of all creation. Addressing climate change from an Islamic perspective is about assuming the role of trustees or steward of creation that God bestowed upon humanity. Taoism teaches that Tao, or great way of the universe, guides the relationship between humanity and nature. Therefore, these common concepts make it essential for religions and faith actors to play an effective role in the following manner. First, we need to work on religious literacy concerning the intrinsic relationship between religions and the environment, and educate not only faith leaders, but also the public how environmental issues are reflected in their own religions and values. This will not only enhance our moral responsibility towards Earth, but also increases opportunities of interreligious cooperation towards common threats and strengthen peaceful coexistence. Second, religious voices are very important during intergovernmental negotiations. Third, religious institutions can be models in divesting from fossil fuel, applying moral financial principles, and greening their assets and operations. Fourth, religious institutions need to partner with scientific institutions as religions meet science on issues related to climate change, nature, and pollution. The scientific evidence can help support the faith perspectives, and religions can bring moral values to scientific findings. Fifth, youth are our best chance. Investing in young faith leaders will be key to establish peaceful understanding and collaboration on common threats facing their future, as well as ensure intergenerational dialogue and cooperation. Faith for Earth has established a youth council that is representing 12 religions of young men and women. Ladies and gentlemen, our selfish wants and greed to exploit nature is an act of violence against Earth. What we need is peaceful, non-violent revolution of ethics and values. This is similar to the concept of ahimsa. Ahimsa is not only a concept of Jainism, Hinduism, or Buddhism, but also a concept of all other religions believing in living in peace with one another and with the surroundings. This unification of concept provides an excellent opportunity to all believers to unify and correct the course of humanity that is taking us to a bleak future. Engagement of faith-based organizations and faith leaders can be a tool for addressing peace and security challenges. This can be achieved through meditation, mediations, dialogue, and working towards one global goal to protect our one and only planet. Environment and peace are cross-cutting issues that are intrinsic to sustainable development. While natural resources are vital to achieving sustainable development, they are also increasingly acting as drivers of fragility, conflict, and violence. Interfaith efforts can help resolve and avoid disputes, as well as improve the conditions of millions in civil strife. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Abumoghli. So I would now like to exercise my privilege as a moderator to pose the first question to our distinguished speakers. So, and if I may bring us back to the issue of super diversity, and I want to quote my learned colleague, Professor No, who mentioned yesterday that societies have been diverse throughout history. And with globalization and global migration, we now have super diversity. So we see societies now that are even more diverse than they used to be. So I wonder, from your experience, I wonder what do you think are some possible platforms or ways that societies can rely on to achieve the common good? Maybe we start with Mr. Molly.
Myself, okay.
Oh, we like to.
Yes, if I may.
Yeah.
As everybody has been saying for 2 days now, or a day and a half, there are so many common things in religions than there are diverse views or different views. And I once challenged one of my colleagues, and I read a script from the Holy Quran. And I said, can you guess where it is from? Well, he said, oh, this is of course from the Bible. This is God's words. And I challenged another colleague, and I read something from the Veda and said, oh, this is from the Bible. So if you close your eyes and look internally to your human self, you would believe in any religion, because they are all saying the same, right? They are all upholding high values and morals and principles. So it doesn't matter what background you are. We are all on this earth. We are all in one boat. Either we sink together if we don't collaborate, or we float and go to the harbor safe. So many platforms do exist, in fact. For example, coming from a policy-making body, we have been providing this platform of the United Nations Environment Assembly that invites more than 12,000 people every 2 years to come and discuss policy issues that are related to the environment. And then at the end of the assembly, they adopt decisions and resolutions that are bounding to member states. So they have to go back and implement them. What was lacking before 2019, when we invited the faith leaders, the moral voices was lacking from these policy discussions. So in 2019 and then in 2022, we brought hundreds of faith leaders to have policy dialogue with decision makers. And faith leaders have actually submitted statements, what they represent of their values towards nature and what they call upon the decision makers to consider, but also what they commit to do as faith leaders and institutions. So to me, the most important forum or platform to be is when the decision making is happening. Please, as faith leaders, do participate in political dialogue, all right? We know for centuries religions have been sided and you know, because of the conflicts and so on. But now it's the time to integrate within the society, within the policy making, within the political arena, because at the end of the day, it is the rule of law that will you know, be implemented. So we want the faith voices, their values and morals, to be included in these decisions and law-making bodies that affect our daily life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's very right. And I'm happy sitting next to you. And yeah, but I had some feeling that the term of super diversity doesn't explain all the situation in every single corners of the world. It must be very true in Singapore, of course, and London or New York, but not yet in Tokyo. But so you can say there's a super diversity on the level of the earth. We have been diverse. So many people, tribes, and people are staying there. So if you see as an earth as a unit, super diversity been there all through the histories. So again, then I'm not going to suggest the platform only adapting to the situation of super diversity. I try to suggest some few points for the platform or super diversity of the earth, in a sense, which is that as an anthropologist, I know the values of non-verbal communication. So many things are being discussed by words and different language. Now we are using English, but the different language. Language has a power. And in the case of Sri Lanka, where I started my field work about 20, 30 years ago, as you know, Tamil and Sinhala, and Muslim too, but two people cannot speak each other's language at all, although they've been staying there in one country more than 2,000 years, maybe longer than that. And only the language, lingua franca, is English. But not all the people can speak English well. Only the upper cosmopolitan class communicate in English. And they are very cosmopolitan. They had a PhD from Oxford, Harvard, all the places. And they are global cosmopolitan people. So they usually don't care about other 99% the people who cannot speak English. And the case in not just in difference, but the language and the still. So to resolve these kind of issues, but these issues all shared of many, many parts of the society. Of course, education is important. Language education, the English as lingua franca is important. Actually, Sri Lankan government started to medium using the different language, Tamil for Sinhala, Sinhala for Tamil, around the 1980s, I think. But it takes time. But sometimes the communal violence, what kind of things are just started promptly. So I always think that the non-verbal communication is much primordial touching issues, and you can use that one for instinctively enhancing the communications. And there's many ways of enhancing the non-verbal communications using arts, music, and all kinds of, methodology of the work. And that would be very, very important as a methodology to enhance the commonality, the platform. It will be very, very important to put more focus on the non-verbal communications and the making a kind of program and share with not just young kids, but with the adult or kind of elder people like me, or the all generations. Okay, that's what I feel.
And like to respond, Mr. Azoulay?
Yes, I just want to add, I fully agree with what you said regarding this wake-up religious call. But we cannot avoid to understand why religions were, by now, and for unfortunately a long time, misused. Religions were effectively in the landscape, but not for the good. So we have first to understand why and how. Nice to call on religions, but maybe first to understand how did we get, we are all confronted to this very, very archaic, regressive understanding or use of religion to move forward differently. The same for diversity. If we look on the current situation all over the world, diversity is not an asset, it's a problem. And we regressed, and it's a reality. So we cannot just call on something different if we don't address how and why we are in this, let's say, archaic situation, which didn't exist years before. So we regress. Even in the most advanced countries and societies.
You. And we are now going to turn to some questions from our audience. Maybe we can start with this first question. Is how can we convince an individual as well as members of a religious group to get out of their comfort zone and to interact with people across the spectrum for the common good, especially if they are not inclined to do so? So what are some possible ways that we can encourage them to come out of their comfort zone and get to know others? Mr. Azoulay.
No, it's okay.
Well, if I may start by, we need to bring religious actors with non-religious actors together. So we're not only encouraging interfaith collaboration, but also faith collaboration with the secular sector. And from my own perspective, this is very important if you bring scientists in dialogue with religious leaders. So religious leaders, and Pope Francis is a great example. For example, in his Laudato Si, the encyclical letter, which he talks about the relationship between humans and the environment from a biblical point of view, actually cites science and what the scientists are saying. So he talks about, IPCC report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. He talks about the IPBES report, the report on biodiversity, which are or have been produced by scientists. Now, this provides them with the evidence and confidence to speak in a manner that is convincing, in addition to the convincing words of their sacred scripts. If you if I speak to a group of people, they would say, oh, Iyad is a bureaucrat from the UN, he blah, blah, blah. But if an imam or a priest say the same thing that I am saying, they would say amen. Because they believe that he has, or she has, a point of reference that is moral and that is divinely, right? So they would accept that argument. So bringing both the secular and religious sectors together, at least the leaders, and this is how we're trying to do it, to provide that platform of discussions and agreeing on common things, is very important.
So I think you're very right, and it's this kind of issues of the common ground, such as environmental, the scarce resources, and the etc. That is good way, the science, a good way to not to talk about the kind of belief itself or kind of rituals or dogmatic rituals or religions, but can talk on the same issues using their commonness understanding. But again, there is always split among the religions too. So as I said in my short speech, understanding for the religious people to the other religions are very much important, not just the interface, not just living next to next, but get into the other religion, which must be very difficult things for them. But I just want to share my recent experience that there is a Jesuit monastery in church and in the center of the Tokyo and the center of Sophia University. And this monastery been there nearly 100 years after Japan opened the door to the Christianity at the Meiji era. So I took a Buddhist group from China and to this church. But this monastery usually never had this kind of other religious people to get into the core of this sacred room. But they opened the door and we went there. And the Chinese Buddhist groups never had that kind of experiences in China. In the churches, other religions is kind of out of their scene. So we took them and we went to the very sacred area. And we saw the cushions that Zen Buddhist monks usually use for the meditation. And we said, oh, you have a cushion for the Zen. And they say that there are several priests who were well trained as a monk in a Buddhist temple in Japan. And they ordained as a monk to a certain level, maybe not a fully monk, but and then they brought this methodology of meditation to them to practice every morning in the church, monastery. So, including myself, the Chinese Buddhist groups are so much shocked and intrigued and surprised and happy. And so I don't think that these beliefs are mingled in that level of the teaching stuff, but as a matter of the practice, we saw very, very clearly that there is a space that both religions work together, and these priests opened the door for us to show it. And I'm very, very curious what these Buddhist groups are going to talk about it, how they are going to talk about it after going back to China. So as such, you know, we do need a more embedded communications between the regions, not just interface, but really get into deeper the other side. I'm not asking all the religious leaders to do that. However, it's always religious leaders who are so much curious about other religions and very working to seek the commonalities with other religions. So just talking about an example for that.
I think that we missed one word, which is education. It's important, I mean, to have the religious leaders meetings with seculars and that, but I'm sorry to say that it was done. It's not something which really will change the game. We are confronted to some urgent, short-term issues. And we have to start from the very beginning. Education is key. And I have the privilege to just share an experience we have in my country regarding diversity. For a very long time, we teach our children that Morocco started to exist with the arrival of the Arabo-Muslim civilization, which means 1,000 and something more years. We were wrong, because, I mean, we wrote an history book which was not the true one. When we decided a few years ago to make a radical revolution change in the scholars' curricula, you cannot imagine how quick, how powerful, how deep was the change in the few years later. And we understood that if you took the problem, the issue, from the basis, from the very beginning, it's a very powerful asset. And education is key. And you belong to an organization which is the UN, okay? And the body of the UN for education is UNESCO, for sciences, for diversity. And we used the work of UNESCO to sustain our cultural education revolution. And I can tell you that we have to be grateful to the UN, because we made a very, very strong change very quickly. And we have the material. We have all what we need. We just have to leverage it and to change the data.
Thank you for the really enlightening sharing. And we have a question which is actually very relevant to Singapore. Singapore's Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong recently announced at the national rally that Singapore will repeal 377A, which is an old colonial law that criminalizes homosexuals. So the thing is, what can we do to embrace diversity and create a society that is inclusive to minorities, especially the LGBTQ community? Would like to,
Yeah, can I? Okay.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
It's excellent that when I read this news in my social media, I can't believe, is this happening in Singapore or some other country? But this is Singapore, and very sure it's happened. So I also understand there are many different opinions from the different groups of religions here even too. But as you mentioned, that there is also a line of being religious and part of a religious group, and also to be a part of the citizens and the civilians. So we can have identity more or less same as the religious members as well as the citizens. And these issues of sexualities and all these other different kinds of sexual-oriented minorities, or can be majorities, we're not sure, but this is area of the citizens, area of the civil societies and something, and the religions also have to think about it and cooperate with that, and then try to find a discourse. All religions has a rich discourse in itself. So rich, not simplified issues like these sexual orientations or something outside of their own religion, nothing. They have so rich text in it. So they can find the discourses to justify this kind of rights of civil societies. So this is my thinking.
Thank you.
Well, from my perspective, I would say, be human and be a good citizen. That solves almost everything. I am a Muslim, he's a Jew, there are Christians, Buddhists, and so on. We are in one room. We breathe the same air. We drink the same water. We will eat the same lunch. I hope it's nice as it was yesterday. So there's no difference between us. I might be sitting here and blah, blah, and you know, being seen as, wow, this is a UN and so on. But I have problems maybe at home, right, that I need to deal with, like all other people. So we are facing the same living situations. So if I am a sexually oriented in a different way than yours, you're not my judge, right? You're not my God or my divine force who will punish me or maybe put me in heavens. I don't know if I have a different orientation. So we are not the judges of others. This is a man-made system, right? So let the divine judge. What I care for is if you are my good neighbor or not. If you treat me as I treat you, right? And if we both serve the nation, the globe, the international community as we should. This is what matters. And nothing else matters. If you are a woman, a man, whatever orientation you are. What is important is that we have to consider ourselves as citizens to the international community. Because whatever we do here might affect Pakistan, that is drowning now. 1/3 of Pakistan is underwater. Why? Because somebody, kept their ACs on for centuries and they used all the oil and so on, and they corrupted the atmosphere. So our individual behaviors affects everybody, and we are members of the same community.
Thank you.
Just one word. I fully agree with what was said, but I think we have to do our best to avoid polarization and to give a chance to a long, soft run to deal with this cultural revolution which is in front of us. But if we polarize the debate from the very beginning, it will create more problems than solving anything. And I mentioned the world of education before, and in this kind of rhetoric and issue, I will add another word, culture. Give a chance to what culture could provide, and with maybe issues, to deal with issues where religion, politics, ideologies are already on the table. But I have also personal experiences when I'm dealing with the same issues by leveraging art, by leveraging music, by leveraging literature, by leveraging poetry, by leveraging even an understanding and reading of my beliefs by a cultural approach. And I can tell you that, there is no magic in it, but by nature, it provides really many possibilities and many initiatives which, by culture, have a different understanding.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, and I definitely hope that we can build a more cohesive and more inclusive society, especially here in Singapore. And now, changing gear a little, now let's talk about. We have some questions on the issue of politics and policy making. So, the members of the audience are wondering, how can we encourage interactions and collaborations between religious and secular sectors on important issues, and how do we navigate the fact that politics and policy need to remain secular in most societies? And more importantly, how may thought leaders like yourself convince policymakers to be discerning when formulating social policies to make the society a more cohesive one, and also to harness the ways to promote the common good?
As usual,
as
start.
When I said that we need to work with religious leaders to engage with politicians, I did not mean to politicize religions, right? Religions remain religions, a set of values and behaviors and moral principles and so on, and history and, you know, good stories and so on. What I meant is that when we, at the global level, talk about ethical behavior, for example, right? And when we talk about values, you know, the American values, the Singaporean values, and so on, where did all these values come from historically? It's a build-up of cultures, practices, and religions. So when I talk about honesty, honesty was, you know, there for centuries, promoted by religious institutions and religious leaders and so on. So going back to the common grounds between the secular system and the religious system is the way forward. So to complement one another and to maximize the good in one another. Religions are a set of values. Systems, or the political systems, I hope, are ethical and value systems that institute the living of the people, you know, putting a governance system, because we cannot leave things, you know, without having traffic laws and, you know, marital laws and what have you. So we need to have governance systems, right? But, you know, the complementarity of the two systems should bring them together, the value system and the governance system. And this is how we should look at it, you know, we being all part of the same community.
Yes, it's rather very difficult issues to be a secular state and not commit to the religions and not politicize the religions, but stay to get wisdom or get to the ethical advice from the religious communities. And this really brings the kind of paradoxical situations, not to politicize the religions, but politically working with them. So if you make a kind of wrong directions working with the politicians, definitely to bring the communal violence. So actually, I'm very much impressed that the Singapore government hosted this conference, inviting all different religious groups and mixed with the practitioners, religious leaders, and the governmental peoples and the scholars as well. So I think this kind of opportunities is really, truly needed, in a sense, to have a kind of sense of balancing and sense of kind of communication, way of communicating with some people with whom we can talk. Actually, I'm not going to divide with whom we can talk, we cannot talk, but something having this gathering. And also, this program is very interesting that all afternoon we have networking time. And I said, what is networking time? Just, you know, how to make a network. But it's nice that eating just, you know, short eats or sweets and they're having coffee. Yeah. This kind of atmosphere is very much needed and promoted, not in Singapore, in the other countries as well.
Yeah, I think that I fully agree with the fact that we cannot politicize or use religion for politics. But having said that, maybe it's a little too late. Religions were spoiled already, were misused, were instrumentalized, all religions. And we have to understand why. They took over. I mean, those who want to spoil the religious values and message, they were enough strong and powerful to take over.
Yeah.
So the problem today is, just to follow what you said, how could we retake over? And just come back to the period before, where religious were at the right place for the right message, for the good causes, but we lost it.
Yes.
It's a reality. And we have first to deal with this reality to rebound.
And just nice, we have and we have time for one final question. So, if I may, let us return back to the theme of our plenary session, which is on the common good. So, what is considered common good itself is a very complex concept, which includes understanding of freedom, environment, justice, among others. So what can we build in a united vision of progress for all humanity? So how can we all achieve the common good when we have we have so many diverse ideas, views, and cultures?
Well, if you asked the question probably, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, what are the common goods? You wouldn't easily identify them. But today, we are, as they say, a global village, a small village. A common good is actually my tweet. When I put something on Twitter, it becomes a common good because it reaches far and beyond. It reaches somebody in, I don't know, in the US or in Japan or what have you. So everything is becoming a common good. Now, from my perspective as I am an environmentalist and work for the UN Environment Program, you know, living on a healthy planet is a common good, right? So the use of fuel is something that we need to think about as a common good. If I drive my car, you know, the resultant carbon dioxide might have an impact in Japan or in Indonesia or in the US. When I consume water, right, more than I do or I need, it will impact somebody else who's not finding water to drink. When I extract more resources from the ground to build my railway, for example, that deprives other countries and nations from the same resources that were made for humanity, right? So we need to think of, you know, the way we live, the standards that we have. For example, the consumption of water resources in the Gulf of Arabia or in the US is 5 to 6 times that in, for example, the same countries of the region. In Jordan, for example, one of the most scarce countries in the world. So when you live your life, you need to think of others, as this is your actions are actually impacting everybody else.
I say after the very strong message that you addressed to the people, I would try to say that the common ground exists in yourself. Find your otherness in yourself like you find the other. And knowing yourself and knowing the other better and feel it as a kind of real experiences. That's why I mentioned the field anthropology-like experiences. And this space is getting more and more, less and less. And of course, avatar can swim on the screen, but if you cannot swim, you'll be drowned. So my point is that the very important issue to share the experiences, knowing your perhaps family members, knowing the other neighbors in the super diversity layers of the communities, And knowing and experiences, share the food, share the experiences, share the feelings, not just by one language, but by the arts and other feelings is most important stuff, complementary stuff to what you said.
Just one word again. I mean, when it comes to common goods, give a chance to a deep, radical change in our education systems. I don't see anything more powerful, more meaningful, and full of such premises than giving a chance and investing more for education. That's the key.
Thank you. And we have come to the end of our second plenary session. So please join me in thanking our distinguished speakers for their very insightful sharings and wonderful insights. So thank you.